Good morning and welcome. I appreciate everyone coming on board this morning and shifting your plans from our face-to-face breakfast through to our new webinar series. Pretty timely topic from our perspective around employee experience and how we are supporting our employees through this really interesting time at the moment. And this is a topic we presented on in December last year, and we had such great feedback that we thought we would run it again. And I think it's more timely than ever that we're having this conversation right now. And the perspective from my point of view has changed slightly in the fact that my environment is about creating a physical space. And right now we're all being told to go home and work from our home spaces, which is obviously going to be a very different challenge for people right now. But there will be a return to work at some point, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation around what our workplaces look like once we actually do return to them, and what our expectations are going to be, both from an organisational perspective but also from an employee perspective. So I think this morning is going to be a really great conversation. We have the chat open, and we also have the Q&A open. So if you do have any questions as we run through, please pop them in the Q&A. We'll be doing a Q&A session at the end where you'll get to have a conversation with each of the panelists, and we'll answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. So thank you for joining us this morning. So to get us started, hang on, there's a bit of a lag here. And now we have blank slides, which are even better. Come on. There we go. So if we talk about employee experience, what we've got here is that designers tend to work at the intersection of people, place and technology. And in the middle of all of that, we're talking about creating human experiences. But if we take that one step further, in the context of our workplaces, we're actually talking about employee experience. And Josh Burson is a global researcher in the realm of employee experience and talent management. And he talks about these 6 spaces in his irresistible organisation concept, and that covers off meaningful work, hands-on management, having a productive environment, having that opportunity for growth, trust in leadership, and health and well-being. And the recent events have only really highlighted so much of this right now, and it's now a matter of us understanding how that actually translates into our own organisations. And when we look at this, these 6 categories can really be synthesised down into 3 key environments. And those 3 key environments are our cultural, our physical, and our technological environments. And when these 3 environments are coming together, that's when we're starting to create that employee experience. So our cultural environment is the way employees feel about your organisation. It's the purpose, the values, the behaviours and the structures that are in place to support people at work. And it's really that whole concept of the way things are done around here. It's just that expectation and all those unwritten ground rules, the way we feel about our organisation and what holds us together. The physical environment is the built space in which employees actually work. So it's what they see, touch, hear and smell. And then we've got our technological environment, and that's really our virtual space, and it's the tools that employees use to do their work. It's their laptops, their devices, their software, their systems, the app, and those environments are very much being tested at the moment. What we then see is when we can bring those 3 environments together, we end up with this mix of spaces. And the Ikigai concept is a Japanese philosophy, and I particularly love this one because it's all about your reason for being. So what is your purpose in life? And it works on this concept of there are 4 spheres. There's what we love, what the world needs, what we can be paid for, and what we are good at. And when those 4 spheres intersect, we have different things that arise in our life. So we have our passion, our mission, our profession, and our vocation. But what's interesting is it's only when those 4 spheres are in perfect harmony that we can actually be living our full sense of purpose and our Ikigai, and makes us feel like we have our reason for being in place. And if we are out of kilter in a few of those ways, so let's say we have what we love and we're doing what the world needs, we're fulfilling our mission. But what happens in that space is that we have this delight and we've got this fullness, but without any pay. So a great example of that is that we might be fulfilling our desire to support, you know, impoverished countries, and we might be volunteering our time and we're fulfilling something that feels good inside us, but it's unsustainable over a period of time because we're actually not creating income from it for ourselves. So we need to find ways that we can sustain and fulfill all elements of our life so that we're living everything in perfect balance and achieving our ikigai. When you apply that to those three environments from a workplace perspective, you're looking at how the cultural, the physical, and the technological environments can all work together to create that perfect harmony, which at the center of these three is your experiential environment. And that experiential environment requires you to have an empowered, engaged, and enabled workforce. But if you've only got a really great cultural environment and an excellent physical environment, but your technology isn't supporting those environments, you might have a very engaged workforce, but they're not empowered or enabled. And that's probably what we're seeing quite a bit of at the moment, because we have these environments that haven't had the technological grounding to be able to support people in this shift from having to work in a workplace to being able to work from home. So when we get all three of these environments working, that's when we're truly living our experiential environment from an employee experience perspective. Now, these graphics have been abstracted from Jacob Morgan, and he's a futurist and works in the world of work and has recently produced a book on the future leader. And he's some great insights, and he's really synthesized this really, really well. So when you look at those environments and the concepts that we've just discussed, when we understand our reason for being or our purpose, and that is then infused through our physical, our cultural, and our technology, that's when we're starting to create an employee experience. But the value of that is because that employee experience then drives employee engagement. And when we have employee engagement, that's when we can create business value. So the business value then shows up through innovation, productivity, attracting and retaining great talent, increased sales, customer satisfaction, and the list goes on. So there is a direct linkage between understanding and fulfilling your purpose as an organisation and embedding that through all of those three environments to drive employee experience and create business value. So I'd like to welcome our speakers this morning, and you can see each of them there on the screen. Both myself, Sonia, and Jeff will be speaking about those three environments. And then we've also got Lisa, who's going to be sharing the experience from a client-side perspective, having lived and breathed through this whole process at the end. And then we'll also be having the Q&A, as I mentioned earlier. So our first up is going to be culture, and that's with Sonia from Leading Well. Now, Sonia heads up Leading Well's team in Queensland, and since 2008, she's been specialising in developing world-class leadership programs that combine strategy with a holistic approach that addresses the organisation as a human system and the leader as the designer of that system. Sonia has supported leaders to build thriving organisations that deliver exceptional results. Her clients include Nespresso, IBM, Lloyds, Global Pay, BHP, and numerous Queensland government departments, universities, and local councils, both big and small. So despite her lingering Canadian accent, Sonia graduated from UQ with a first-class engineering degree, worked as a scientist at the CSIRO, and started and successfully exited a successful national software business in the 1990s. And she also held executive leadership positions with global technology firms for over a 10-year period. So I'd like to now welcome Sonia and hand over to her to take over from here and tell us about how we can create a great cultural environment.
The first thing I need to do is unmute myself. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Melissa. That was a lovely but long-winded introduction. You know, it's really interesting when we look at building a thriving culture. Certainly we are facing exceptional times now, and organizations that have really set themselves up are perhaps better able to weather the storm than others. But we're going to have a look at deep diving into what really makes up great culture and some of the principles and practices that will really enable great culture to thrive. And I really want to start with just acknowledging that the focus and drive around performance has been something we've been striving towards for many years. Since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, we've been striving for increased performance. And yet, trying to achieve high performance and sustained performance in today's increasingly volatile and complex and uncertain global environment, where disruption seems to come out of nowhere, as it has just recently, makes it harder and harder to drive down performance and maintain it over time. And I think what we're realizing inside organizations is that more and more these days is that we need everyone in order to drive performance. So we need to harness the potential energy that sits and the potential capability that sits all through organizations. And sometimes that gets tied up in unproductive resistance and behaviors inside organizations. But when we have events like we are experiencing now, or we're experiencing periods of change and things that disrupt our planned future, disrupt our beautiful strategic plans, it's our ability to adapt and to come together that really sets us apart from other organizations. McKinsey's Tom Peters and Robert Waterman published a really great piece of research a long time ago, in 1982, which seems like 1,000 years ago now. But they looked, it's particularly relevant because it's a bit of research that we've been tapping into over the years. And in this bit of research, they identified a lot of organizations, I think it were 50 organizations, that they deemed by a whole lot of metrics to be high-performing organizations that would absolutely stand the test of time, that would weather the storm, that would weather these unplanned major change events as they come through. Jim Collins did a similar bit of research in the 90s where he looked at organizations in good to great and built to last. And what we saw through longitudinal studies was that by 2006, so they'd weathered one change event in 1987, but you hadn't seen the global financial crisis, that 46% were struggling. A third of those organizations no longer even existed. And only 20% were actually deemed to be high performing. And I wonder if we actually look back, and I'm sure they will look back at this major event and consider the impact of this event on their ability to maintain performance inside their organizations. Because we have to acknowledge that this particular event, this coronavirus that we're facing, is pretty unprecedented. And you could consider, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term of black swan events, but black swan events are defined as unforeseen and unpredictable crises that have extreme consequences. Recessions since World War II have really been caused either by three major things. They've been caused by economic policy mistakes, oil shocks, or financial bubbles. But this is quite specific in that it really represents a new category where we're experiencing global societal shock on a level that hasn't been experienced before. And I was reading, actually, this is a bit of interesting data. Only in February 26th, that's literally a month ago, Deloitte surveyed 4,500 executives in the US and asked them, of which of those three major events, economic policy mistakes, oil shocks, or financial bubbles, or a fourth factor, which is something else, which of those events would actually cause our next downturn? And a third actually called out this something else. So there's a sort of a sense that things were coming, but they had no idea what it would be. And now we do. Now, if we consider that and think about how can we predict those organizations that will be best placed to weather this black swan event, to weather this economic and societal shock event, we can look to the research that has been done around major change events. And so I wanted to share this data with you, which comes out of McKinsey's, which looks at a raft of organizations, up to 500 organizations, which represented many different industries, as you can see there. And they looked at how well they adapted and performed when undergoing major change events. And what we see through the light blue line versus the darker blue line, the lighter blue line is the degree of performance uplift that they had through those change events when they focused on performance alone, when the organization was looking at how those organizations and individuals and teams were actually performing. And what we see with the dark blue line is the degree of success that those organizations achieved through those change events when they looked at both performance and well-being. So what we see is that when we integrate the focus around well-being of the organization, not just around the performance aspect, that overall performance uplifts significantly. In fact, they determined that it uplifted by a factor of 3. So when we bring wellness and performance together and we look at them together, we get a significantly better result. What if we considered that well-being is the performance, is the bedrock of performance, and that it's necessary, and I think we're really recognizing and acknowledging this now in this extreme event, how important it is to really support well-being so that we can uplift performance and we can sustain performance through these incredible and unprecedented events. And I'm absolutely not saying that we need to shy away from performance, that we just shift into viewing well-being as the absolute most important thing. We have to look at performance as well as well-being together, because we all want to perform and organizations need to perform. And leaders need to step up now, as we all are doing, to make pretty hard decisions that will sustain our performance of our organizations over time. So we must make sure that when we're talking about well-being, we're not doing it at the expense of talking about performance. However, if we consider that well-being actually provides really important elasticity to organizational fabric, and it allows organizations to stretch and to flex and to reshape and reform, which is so vital to adapting when we're under significant pressure as we are today. So if well-being is vital to enabling performance, we need to get really, really clear about what well-being means inside an organizational context, because we often hold it solely and only in a personal context. And particularly now with this virus, we are looking at it individually, but we really need to look at it also as a collective. So how would we define well-being at an individual level? Well, we could say that well-being is a sense of firing on all cylinders, living life to its fullest, and experiencing calm and ease while we do so. I've delivered this definition for the last 6 months, and I've got to say now as I read it, I think how fleeting those moments have been over the last couple of weeks in particular. But perhaps we can think back to when we did feel that sense of firing on all cylinders and feeling really having our mojo and feeling calm and ease, and how wonderful that was, and how that allowed us to perform. But if we shift our lens to the organizational context, we think about what well-being allows at an organizational level. It allows us to align and to execute and to renew ourselves faster than we could before. Allow ourselves to renew ourselves so that we can together achieve exceptional performance over time and weather these incredible events that we find ourselves in. And the benefit of doing that, of course, is that we can release a lot of unproductive noise and behaviors that we're seeing are the result of unhealthy systems. But I want to talk about these unprecedented events that we're in, because what we're really experiencing now is an unprecedented amount of volatility. Look at the stock market. It bounced back 6% overnight, which is the largest gain in a single day since the 1930s. And this volatility that we're experiencing on so many fronts, at home, with our kids that are not knowing if they'll be at school. My daughter's spending her first day at home today. Her school shut down, and we're going to see this. My Pilates place is shut down. How do I keep myself well? We're now working in a virtual world and working with our clients in a different way. And we have to understand that in times of unprecedented events like this, which are providing shock societally and economically, and to really acknowledge that our need for certainty is actually a major element that allows us to be solid and to be well. And it's really essential that we focus in a crisis and recognize the impact that this uncertainty is having within all of our people. We have to acknowledge that what is, and that our well-being in a work environment is being impacted. We're not gathering as humans. We're not meeting face to face. We're not sharing stories as much as we did. And the social isolation impact and the uncertainty is playing out both in our worlds at home and at work. And from a neuroscience point of view, it really is, what we're seeing is it drives people's fear triggers. We don't want it to drive our fear triggers, but it is. And our fight and flight centers are being triggered, which is causing a little bit more cortisol and adrenaline. What does that do? It inhibits our prefrontal cortex from actually being able to think as well as we could think before. And it heightens our reactivity, and people react in quite different ways. Some withdrawing, some creating unnecessary noise. But what we see is dynamics that we need to acknowledge and address as we work through this, and certainly not soldier on as we have done before. So at times like this, our emotional intelligence as leaders is absolutely critical, in knowing that everything we do in this crisis, we need to express empathy and compassion for the human side of this upheaval, acknowledging how radically employees' personal priorities may have shifted to being concerned on many different fronts where they weren't concerned before. So we need to really understand how we resource ourselves as leaders to strategically tap into our sense of self and be on the front foot, to recalibrate and notice the well-being of those around us and connect with those parts of our human system that may be under stress right now. And I'd like us to really consider how we resource ourselves as leaders to be grounded, to be solid, to be compassionate, and to be courageous with what we are dealing with and in our interaction with others, and supporting those around us to also draw on their resources. And while we're thinking about how we're individually coping, lifting to the wellness of the whole system, lifting the conversation to the system as a whole. Because the story doesn't end with just how well we are coping and how well our people are coping, but it also, we have to look at how the whole system as a whole is coping. And when we zoom out, we notice a lot more than we do when we are just stuck in our own lived experience or noticing the well-being of the individual. And when we zoom out, if I can just make the analogy of a traffic jam, if you get up into a helicopter and you observe what's actually happening with the traffic jam, it's very different to what we're experiencing when we're in the traffic jam. And when we're in the traffic jam, it feels very blocked, and we have the sense that what's happening is actually happening in front of us, and the banking up is happening in front of us, and the frustration mounts. And when we get into the helicopter, we get a whole different perspective when we notice that actually the traffic jam is actually building behind us. We see the big tail of the traffic jam building. And so we really need to hold the whole system and consider the dynamics that are in our system, and noticing what's changing between different parts of our system. And look for those, be dynamic hunters, if you like, and look for and really sense what is shifting now as people work online, as people are working in remote teams. Where is silence growing? Where is frantic energy happening? Where are there dynamics that need addressing is really, really important. And as leaders, we need to address that in a whole different level than we did before. So when we zoom out, we need to, as I said, consider those dynamics between the individuals. And we have to know that systems actually, people are made by systems, and they are impacted by what the system is like. So if our system is changing, people will be impacted by what they're experiencing through that change on a home front, but also in their work environment. And organizational performance and the performance of individuals is really impacted by those dynamics and those shift in dynamics that they're experiencing. And that's the clarity of perception we really need to have when we're working with human systems. And when we're looking at the culture that we had before, how do we sustain that culture and those dynamics that have really served us in the past in the new world? And know that those dynamics are really supporting us or challenging us to embrace change that we're experiencing. Human systems are experiencing a bit of shock, but what follows shock is trauma. And that's a really big word. And I'd really encourage, as leaders, when you zoom out and you look at your whole system, to look for those places and those dynamics that may be experiencing shock and trauma, and think about what you can do to tap into that and what is working to shift behavior to be more productive in these times. When you are a whole of system leader and you hold the whole system, not just caring for the well-being of the individuals, but caring for the well-being of the whole system, the really encouraging thing is that research over the last 10 years is really showing that there are consistent principles that guide the wellness of systems. And I want to explore two of those today. There are a number of patterns and principles that are really important when we look to deal with how human systems interact. And you'll know these instinctively, in fact. This is just giving some additional language for you to use. But if we think about belonging and how important it is to belong to a system, belonging is one of the most vital principles that guide the well-being of a human system. And it's one of the reasons why when people come together in an office environment that's really highly productive, where that space encourages people to come together and to feel that sense of belonging and support amongst each other, it results in significant uplift in productivity and well-being. And so while we move into a remote world, how do we ensure that people feel that they belong? Because people are now reacting to this changed world in different ways. So I think as leaders, we really need to strive to make sure that we are actively including and bringing people together and ensuring that the group feels a strong sense of belonging to the team and to the system. Beginnings and endings are another very vital systemic principle that guides the wellness of organizations. And right now, we are in a period of significant beginning and endings. Endings really matter to the health of the system. When things end, people feel that ending. And it's really natural to close up and to pretend that that ending doesn't exist. So for example, here we are no longer meeting face-to-face. We're meeting at home and we're trying to do our work the way that we, in new ways. But what we know is that if we don't acknowledge the ending and the loss, it makes it hard for people to move forward. It makes it harder for people to let it go and to productively embrace a new way of working. And loss is on many fronts. This ending, if we think about what we were doing just a month ago, we were meeting face-to-face, we were having client meetings, I was catching up for a coffee with a friend before we headed into the office. We may have been working on projects that have been put on hold because they're of less priority. In times to come, we may be letting go of a few people that have been in our system. And it's absolutely crucial that we allow people the space to acknowledge how they're feeling about these endings and to acknowledge that the feelings around letting things go and the loyalty that people feel to what existed before is a real thing. We don't have to dwell on it forever, but just to pay that acknowledgement to what has changed will allow people to embrace what is to come in a much more productive way. And there's some really great ways that we can support each other through this. We can really reconnect on why we exist. We can connect with our purpose, something Mel said earlier. Purpose is so important. That can allow us to acknowledge what we're letting go of so that we can remain really centered around our purpose. We can gather around each other and connect and create belonging by tapping into our caring and make sure that we notice when somebody is tapping out or someone is a little quieter than they were before, and make sure that we include and bring them with us. So just a few key messages. Particularly now, it's really important that we attend to the well-being and notice what is well and what might be struggling in amongst our whole system. And that extends to our partners, it extends to our clients, it extends to all of those within our system and our teams, as well as the individuals within our system. And when we do so, we need to understand that when well-being is threatened, what we're actually saying is energy being expended in unproductive ways, either in withdrawal or in phonetic energy, or in resistance to moving forward. So when we address it, we'll really release that energy so that people can remain productive and performance can be maintained in these uncertain times. So building belonging and making sure we're really connecting with each other is crucial. And allowing people to acknowledge and somewhat grieve for what's being lost, whether they be the little project or the activity or the meeting that they used to do, and acknowledge that there is loyalty to what was past. And acknowledging that in acknowledging that loyalty and what's being lost, know that we can move forward and fully grasp and connect to the new beginning. And in doing so, making sure that your leaders and your team leaders are really aware of leading the team, leading the whole as well as the individual, and are aware of the whole of the system and the dynamics within the system as they move forward to embracing this new world that we're living in, and to supporting your organizations to survive and to thrive and learn the lessons that we'll be bringing into the future when we all emerge from this in hopefully not the too distant future. Because we'll learn lessons that will really allow us in the long term to bring performance and well-being together. And in the long term, we will all be much better for this. And we should see our organizations be well equipped to thrive well into the future beyond this pandemic that we find ourselves in. So thank you. I will say thanks, and I will stop sharing and pass on to the next presenter.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And yeah, I'll just pick up from there and share my screen. So quite a timely conversation, as we've said, around how we support our culture in these unusual times. So I'm now going to be speaking about the physical environment. My computer's just a little slow. There we go. We're all good. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mel Marsden, the director and founder of COMUNiTI, and we create commercial workplace environments to help drive high-performing teams. So, you know, we work with a lot of different clients. We've worked with people from Lisa from Mapian here, who's on the call this morning, through to Air New Zealand, Hall Chadwick, a range of different clients in that commercial space, all in the professional SME sector. So our main goal as an organisation is to create a space that helps tell your organisation's story and to help connect people within your space to help you create your own community. And so what I want to speak to you today about is how your physical environment can start to leverage some of these elements. Now, it might seem a little ironic at the moment, given that none of us are probably in our workplaces, but this is a temporary thing. We will be returning, and I think we need to start really thinking about what that space is going to look like and how is it going to support the needs of our people when we do return to work, because I think that it's become it's been very evident that that is going to shift, and that the role of our workplace is something that we probably haven't been considering previously, is that the role of our workplace is not the space that we go to from 9 to 5 to do our job. It's actually a very important factor in our mental health, in our social and our human connection. And a lot of these principles that we've been speaking about are very much valid, and I just want to take you through those and explain how I think we can create a really great physical environment. So I believe that there's 4 factors in that, and the first one is that it should inspire us. It should make you proud of where you work, and you should feel proud of your environment that you're going to every day. It should reflect the values of the organisation. It should draw people together, and it should shape your community, and it should embody the essence of your brand and your culture. So I'm going to take you through each of these elements and give you a perspective on how I think we can create really great workplaces for us into the future. So if we're creating an environment that's inspirational and proud, as I said, people should feel excited about coming to work every day. It should be uplifting. It should remind them of why they do what they do. You really want to create an environment where people actually want to go to work every day other than have to. And I think even in most recent of discussions that I've seen in social media is kind of covered with it right now, is that people really want to go to work because they want that social interaction, but we should also have an environment that that attracts people, makes them physically want to actually go to work as well. And it should be somewhere that your employees are not embarrassed by, but they're excited about inviting their clients into as well, and welcoming them into your space and welcoming them into your community. The amount of stories that I've heard about people who meet their clients in coffee shops downstairs because they're so embarrassed about bringing them into their work environment because it doesn't really reflect who they are as an organisation, or it's really tired and it doesn't embody who they are. And it should reinforce their passion for their work, and it should also connect them back to the organisation that they work for. And what I see a lot of is these spaces that organisations inhabit doesn't reflect who they are as an organisation. And the danger that I see in that is that if I'm working for, let's say, an accounting company, but that accounting company is not explaining to me or connecting with me why they are who they are, what's the difference between me working for accounting firm A as opposed to accounting firm B? So it's a really strong way of connecting us to who our organisation is and reminding people about why we work for you and not for the competitor down the road. So in short, people should actually love going to work. We then talk about value-based design, and value-based design can take your organisation to a whole nother level. So when we talk about values, that's about what's important to your organisation. What do you really, really care about? That's kind of the essence of what values are. And this is much more a cultural conversation around identifying and establishing your values. But we want to take that a little bit deeper and really sort of start to understand what are those key metrics and what are those key questions around what actually matters in your business. And what it takes then for someone within your business to be a successful employee. We really want to be able to communicate that, and your space is an opportunity to do that. It's not just a cultural conversation, it is a physical conversation as well. So when you can actually understand what it is that your organisation cares about, we can then begin to articulate that in terms of the behaviours that we expect to see people exhibiting when they do show up to work. How do we know that our organisation's employees are living in alignment with our goals and our values as an organisation? And when we can understand that, we can then start to see what those behaviours are. We can actually then begin to influence those behaviours. And the way that we influence those behaviours is through 3 key ways. It's through the flow of the space. So how do we move within the space from one space to another? What's the sequence of activities that we go through on a daily basis? We can actually create that sequence of activities in how we build and lay out your workplace environment. For example, with Mapian, and it's unfortunate we can't show you this today because otherwise we would be able to physically go, look, this is how it works. When they arrive at the workplace in the morning, their main point of entry is actually via the cafe. So the intention is that they come in, we grab a coffee, we have a chat to our colleagues, we kind of resettle into the organisation from the start of the day. And then as we move through the space, we're actually transitioning through a series of zones and types of behaviours that are expected in those zones. So we go from a very social and vibrant cafe space through to a collaborative and noisy, engaging communal space. Then we transition through some general work areas where we kind of are happy to sit and work and have a chat, and then around to a very quiet zone. So that's where we do our most concentrative work without disruption. So we can actually engineer how these spaces connect to one another and the experience that people are going to have as they work through the space during the day. But that's all in alignment with the values and the behaviours that we want to see in those organisations. We can also use furniture typologies. So furniture can give people very different visual cues around the expected behaviours and the types of energies that we expect to see in those spaces. So to give you an example, again, if we say that we are a very collaborative organisation, what we expect to see there is stand-up tables with lots of whiteboards and screens and things. So what we're doing is we're indicating to people that when we're standing up, we're in a much more active, energetic state of being in our personal physical sense. But then we're actually providing people with the tools to engage and to collaborate through screens and whiteboards to then give the people those visual cues that this is a space where we want you to communicate, we want you to collaborate, and we want you to be noisy. Conversely, if we're giving you a library space which has got a nice big soft fluffy lounge chair, is surrounded by books, there's no tools, there's no technology around you, it's giving you a very different physical cue that this is a space where you can just relax, you can sort of become a little bit introverted. There might be single seats, so there's no way that you can have a secondary person there to have a conversation. All of these things are ways that we can actually influence people's behaviour through the use of our furniture. The same thing happens with our arrangement and our proximity. And as I said, with the flow of space, we have arranged the spaces and we've identified the proximity of one space to another. We haven't got our very quiet and collaborative spaces right next to our noisy and robust spaces, because they're a very different set of tasks that are being performed in those two spaces, but they're also very different energies that people are going to be bringing to those spaces, and we don't want those to be conflicted. So by creating zones that identify how we want people to behave, and we do that in a flow, and we use our furniture typologies, we're actually reinforcing the behaviours that we want people to be exhibiting that are in alignment with the values of that particular organisation. The other thing that we need to consider in that is the ratios of those spaces. So the ratios that we need of quiet to collaboration is going to be very different from organisation to organisation. And that's how we want people to feel and what it's like coming to work. And we want to be starting to appeal to all of their various different senses. So if we're starting to appeal to all the different senses, if we start to look at one of the workplaces that we created here for Hall Chadwick, they are an accounting company. But what we wanted to do was leverage the country values that existed within this organisation. So they were so ingrained into the fabric of this business. They were established in Longreach 40 years ago. So many of their clients are still agricultural clients from Western Queensland. They've retained those clients over those 40 years. And when we dug into who they were as an organisation, the concept of mateship and inviting people in and taking care of one another, all great concepts into today's society and highlighted even more now than ever, they were the things that we wanted to bring to the forefront in terms of how we communicated their business and their values to their clients, but also to their employees. And so the way that we did that was we wanted to have it to come through very subtly in terms of the flow of the space, but also more overtly in terms of the finishes and material palette that we chose that were very iconic of Western Queensland. So we wanted them to see the red dirt in the flooring, the recycled timbers that were being used, the corrugated irons, the truss roofing, all of those very visual elements that remind us of those sorts of country types of vernacular. And then, but we wanted them also to smell the cowhide rug, the freshness of the air in there, and the leather and the upholstery, all very much things that we would associate with those country values. But we wanted them to be able to touch the recycled timber, the warmth of that solid timber, and the coolness in the stone bench tops. And we wanted them to hear the welcoming greeting from the receptionist as she's inviting you in, but also the chatter from the cafe here, which is associated very closely with the reception space. And the whole concept of the kitchen is the heart of the home, and for people to come in and feel welcome and invited into that space. So when all of these senses are being combined, we're actually creating an environment that is communicating who you are as an organisation and how it is that you operate on a fundamental basis. The culmination of all of these elements is what is then aligning you with your community. And we believe that wherever people meet and interact, a community is being formed. And those communities are going to be far more powerful now into the future than they ever have been. This is our space for us to come together and to connect with people that we believe are part of our community, people that we share our values with, we have a similar sense of our experiences, and we have stories that give us this collective sense of meaning, pride, and to come back to Sonia's point earlier, belonging. This is our opportunity to connect and bring together our community in a space where we all feel like we belong in one area. And these are all the things that really then underpin that sense of belonging. And when we actually feel like we have a tribe that we belong to, we have a sense of we are among people who care about the world in the same way in which we care about it. We're around people who believe what we believe. And that's what also further gives us our true sense of identity and that stronger sense of connection into our organisations, but also into our colleagues and the people that we work with. And the fact is that not everyone is going to align with your sense of belonging and your sense of community and your values. But by creating an environment that reflects who you are as an organisation and what you believe, you will then actually attract those that do. So that's from clients to employees, and you'll have a far stronger sense of community that evolves around this. So when we continue to talk about that community, it really feeds into that sense of belonging. But what that belonging also does is it counteracts our sense of loneliness. And what we've found too through these sense of community and the research that's been done into loneliness, the Black Dog Institute has actually found that loneliness is not just a social and mental health issue, but it can also become a physical health issue. What they have found is that that feeling of loneliness can actually lead to an increased rate in earlier death by 26%. And this has become such an issue that the Australian government has decided to announce a $46.1 million investment into counteracting the effects of loneliness. So our workplaces are such an important factor. And I think now more than ever, we've realised that because we're having to work remotely and we don't have that sense of physical and social connection, we've really realised the importance that our workplaces are creating in our environments. They aren't the 9 to 5 place. They are that place for us to come together and have social connection, but also that feeling of meaning and purpose and fulfillment, and that we're contributing as people in society. So our workplaces need to consider all of our mental and emotional wellness and how we can then physically support that as well. And that physical support comes through a variety of different spaces in our environments. So when we are actually creating a variety of different spaces that are supporting a multitude of things, we're actually then able to support our physical ability to perform the required tasks that we need to do in our workplaces. So these variety of spaces are supporting an individual in terms of how they wish to work, but also the tasks that they need to perform. So when we break this down, what this is looking at is we need places where we can go and we can work quietly, spaces where we can concentrate alone or work among others. We need collaborative spaces where we can brainstorm, we can create, and we can work with others. We need standing spaces to keep us physically active and feeling energetic. We need lounging spaces so that we can relax, we can read, or we can work informally with others. But we also need these bump spaces, and these are the spaces that create informal interaction with other employees. This is where the spaces are really important to help create cross collaboration between departments and different groups that you typically wouldn't work with. And all of these spaces are becoming extremely important. It's about understanding the right balance of those to support the needs and the tasks of your organisation, because the way that your organisation is going to work is very different to another organisation, and how we bring all of that together. We really need to understand the role of people, the tasks that they perform, what are the tools that they need to get done, but even who they are as individuals, because the personality profiles of the people within your organisation will give you an indication as to what types of spaces that you need to support them and to the varying ratios that we need to support them. And when we talk about the fact that every business is different, is those tools are different. So when we look at that, it's going to be very different from two different organisations within the same industry. So, for example, a tech company is going to need much higher ratios of collaboration, but also very high ratios of quiet space, whereas an accounting company will need a very different arrangement of spaces again. They will need spaces that are more quiet and concentrative and have less requirement for collaboration in those types of environments as well. My computer's just frozen. The slides are coming, it's spinning. Oh, this is great. Oh, there we go. So this, in terms of an accounting company, they're going to have much more heavier requirement on individual workspaces and less requirement on collaboration. So not only are these spaces necessary tools for helping employees to get their job done, they're actively supporting the health and well-being of our employees in our workplace environments. We're promoting movement between spaces, so we're giving people the opportunity to work through a diverse range of work settings and not be stuck in one single location for the whole entirety of the day. We get up and we move around to find the right environment to suit the task and activity that we need to do. It's about centralising our utilitarian spaces, such as our photocopiers and our kitchen, so that we are drawing people together. We're funneling them into a central location to encourage that informal collaboration. And we're encouraging employees to move around the workspace. And what this movement is doing is it's supporting those desired levels of focus that we need, and we're bringing together the people into hotspots, and so that they can support each other from a physical and emotional wellbeing perspective. What we've also started to see in our workplace environments is the cost that the sedentary occupational lifestyle is actually having on our health and wellbeing. This is a report that was put out by Victorian Health, and it's the fact that 5 million people in Australia are overweight and 1.3 million of those people are obese. That is actually equating to 4 million days in lost productivity, which is costing the Australian economy $3.6 billion every year. If that is the Australian economy as a whole, what is that looking like within your own organisation? What are the steps that we can take to counteract that and to encourage people to have a physical, healthy, active lifestyle within our workplace environments? So when we start to look at how this all comes together, the real key that sits at the end of this is the brand and culture. How does your workplace environment reflect your brand and culture to your employees and to your clients? Now, this is the case study that we're going to have a look at from Mapium, and this is the ultimate prize as an organisation. This is what we can achieve if we consider all of these factors and put it together. So Mapium were formerly called Livingstone's, and they are a HR and industrial relations company. And Lisa's going to talk to you this a little bit further in terms of the employee experience on the other side of this. But this is the process that we took them through in creating this whole workplace environment and the ratios in terms of that we created for them. So what's important to note is that Livingstone's, now Mapium, were previously in a similar size footprint, but there were 36 offices for 36 people. So everyone had a little box that they sat in within the workplace environment. And what happened was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, after 5, if you were leaving, you needed to do a lap of the floor to see if anyone else was still there, so that you had to lock up at the end of the day. They were so segregated and isolated. And what that was creating an impact, because that wasn't the culture or the values of the organisation. So the physical environment was prohibiting them from actually living in alignment with those with their values as an organisation. Their brand concept that sat underneath their whole organisation was about guiding their clients through rough seas where there are rocks underneath while looking to the stars for guidance. The logo that you see there is a sextant, which is a marine nautical navigation device. And so the whole concept that we embedded from this process was that they were so strongly connected to their values as being a family, but also that they had this very strong nautical sense and this concept of travel that existed within their organisation that we wanted to bring to life that wasn't being addressed within their previous workplace. So what we identified that when we went through this whole process with them was that the whole reason that they actually came to work was to connect socially. Now, this is something that every organisation, I think, right now is actually realising is that the real role of our workplace is to connect our people. We're connecting people together to each other, but also we're connecting people to our organisations. And maybe we're just fortunate enough to have been through this process 2 years ago to have addressed this and identified that the whole reason that the people were actually coming into the physical workplace every day was to connect on a social level, to problem solve, and to meet and to address issues that they were having and create solutions together innovatively. So what that enabled us to do was really look at how we brought the workplace together to support that true activity. So this actually made them go from a shift of having everyone having their own office to no one owning a workplace at all. So when you come in here in the morning, you grab your coffee, you grab your stuff out of your locker here behind you, and you go and you find the most appropriate space for you to work during the day, and you can move from one space to another to support the particular need that you have. So they really didn't need a singular space where they could lock themselves away every day. They were coming in here for social interaction, because when they weren't working in the office, they were working from home, they were working in a client's office, they were travelling to clients' offices in remote parts of Queensland, or they were in court. So there was a lot of time that was being spent out of the office, and the workplace wasn't being utilised to its full potential. So when they were coming in to solve really large problems together. The other thing that we identified was that there's a really strong sense of travel within the organisation. So this map that we introduced onto the side wall here, everyone gets a pin with their name on it, and they get to pin it to the last place that they visited. And that's probably quite nostalgic for you guys at the moment, actually, Lisa, to reminisce about where we travelled to in the world, given that we can't actually go anywhere. But that actually created an icebreaker too, so that when new people joined the organisation, or someone that you didn't potentially know so well, you had an opportunity to create a conversation with them through a talking point that was pre-established for you. So how can we bring in elements that are unique to your organisation to help create that sense of connection and build that sense of belonging within each other? We also created very collaborative spaces, and as you can see, you transition from that very noisy social space into this collaborative space, and this is where all the brainstorming happens, and there's a range of different spaces that support that. And this kind of illustrates what we said previously around the fact that we create different types of furniture to create different senses of expectations in people's behaviour. So this collaborative space enables people to come together and brainstorm ideas in a very active type of environment. We've then got spaces where it can be slightly less collaborative, but with smaller groups. And so we've got these booth areas for people to work and meet in. And then we've got these lounging spaces, which are a bit more relaxed. So this is within the general work area, but what it enables people to do is sit there in a more relaxed and different environment, create in a different posture to do work, to have a chat, and to engage with people in a different way, but also to engage in the environment in a different way. And then we have our quiet spaces. So these spaces are very closed in, they're very individual sort of spaces, so that we're encouraging people to behave in a way that is quiet and isolated, as opposed to being in those more collaborative style environments. We've also brought in places for people to conduct and to engage in wellbeing activities. So we've got this small area here. It doesn't need to be anything over the top, but it's somewhere we can sit and we can meditate, we can read quietly, we can stretch, or we can do some yoga poses through this space as well. We've got individual work zones. So we've got rooms where people can come together and quietly meet, but we've also got spaces where we can lock ourselves away and get some really concentrated and quiet work done. And what we found through going back and actually measuring the engagement from people through that, this was 9 months later, when we've taken people through this significant change, we've actually achieved some really interesting outcomes here. So 84% of people are actually feeling far more productive in this new environment. So mind you, we've gone from having 36 people in 36 offices to no one owning a desk. We've got a 91% increase in job satisfaction. We've got 92% of people saying that their relationships have improved. 100% of people saying that their communication is significantly improved, as has their collaboration. So there's some really great soft outcomes that have come from this in terms of the employees' response. And this is the employees telling us how they feel about the workplace. What we've also found is 89% of people said that they were happier, and that there was 100% alignment with their culture and their brand. So the whole space is infused with who they are as an organisation. 50% of people are healthier in the new environment as well. So some really great physical outcomes there for the employees in terms of how that's happening. Now, but what that means is these are all great soft outcomes, but how is that translating to the hard data in terms of the actual numbers? So this is also around workstation utilisation, because we've employed sit-to-stand workstations here, and how many people are actually using the cafe. So 91% of the staff believe that the cafe was the second most important staff facility aside from the work area, because that's the space that everyone can come together and actually socialise. And the bottom line that we've received out of this is that Maping has had their highest financial performance on record 6 months after moving into their new office space. And they're attributing that to the way that people are able to interact in that space. So not only are we getting great employee outcomes, but this is really seeing that employee experience driving business value. They've had a direct financial impact onto their bottom line. And subsequently to this, I've also recently had a conversation with Nadia, and that conversation centered around the fact that given that where the shift has happened in where the organisation has needed to move to in these most recent times, they have also went through a merger, and they've also been through several business acquisitions in this 18-month period since they've moved into their workplace. And the change in their mindset of the organisation and the mindset of their employees has enabled that to happen. If they were still sitting in their previous space, they would not have been able to adapt and move as quickly and as swiftly to adopt these new opportunities that they were presented with. And the fact that they've had this mental shift that's come with their physical environment, that has enabled them to be much more agile as an organisation. So it can actually have a really significant impact on the psyche of the business and also of the employees that are working in that space. I'd now like to hand over to Jeff to speak about technology, and this is probably the most timely of conversations given our current situation. And just to give you a bit of background on who Jeff is and how he is very well qualified to be speaking about this space at the moment. Jeff is a highly experienced and skilled technical solution strategist and director at Surety IT. His knowledge base is based on years of industry experience, having created stable systems both for small, medium and large businesses in the UK and in Australia. He has been working in the IT industry since 1995, working in medium and large organisations in both Australia and in Europe. He has helped businesses understand and guided them through technological challenges, leading to the efficient and effective IT solutions that businesses had originally envisioned. He is an industry expert from the International Leaders Program, a member of the Australian Institute of Management and the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So I'm going to hand over to Jeff now and to talk us through technology.
Morning. Let me just share my screen. Okay, hold on. Is that the right screen? Let's see. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. As Mel said, this is probably a very timely presentation as to the challenges we're all going through. And as you can see, I've had several iterations of this presentation actually over the last 2 weeks. I've had to change it so rapidly. And as you can see from the title, it was originally called The Future of Work. Now businesses are sort of being shoved into the future, and they're having to embrace these technologies that we thought were the future right now. They're having to adopt new practices and technologies out of necessity, but in some cases panic, because we've really gone from an office-based technology solution to a home-based technology solution, and that is really, really different. Originally, when we did this presentation back in December, I did have the line in about 94% of people don't leave home without their mobile phone. I think it's a bit apt that we just remove without their mobile phone, because this is what we could be like in 4 weeks' time. So it is the connected world, but it's also the COVID-19 world. And I think what has been sort of going through my mind after all of this, or through all of this, is when this does end, what are people going to expect as the new norm with regards to their working environment and the technology that they want to use? Because we're going to be in such a changed environment, and people aren't going to settle for the way that businesses use technology or haven't used technology in the past. So from what I can see, or what I see, there's a lot of different things, but I guess the four main ones that I see are the ability to work flexibly. So the ability to work from anywhere at any time on any device, but also the ability to be able to scale up and down. And what I mean by that is an example of actually what happened this week is with the MyGov website. When the government announced that bars and restaurants and were going to be shuttered from Monday, there was a huge increase of people trying to get onto the MyGov website, and it crashed. So people aren't going to accept that in future, and this technology is going to have to be in place that website can scale up and take the amount of visitors at a peak rather than an average. I think another thing that people are going to demand and already are demanding is the mobility. So the ability to work remotely from home, from a mobile device, or from multiple devices. So that obviously brings its challenges in itself, and people are going to want ease of communication. At the minute, communication is really, really difficult. We've gone from a work environment that Mel and Sonia have talked about to potentially next week working from home. So we're not going to have that personal contact. And it is challenging for businesses who are used to the chat in the morning, meeting at the coffee shop. How actually are you going to communicate with your staff? Are we going to be using email? Are we going to be using phones? Or is there other things like instant messaging, video conferencing that we actually have to get on board with? And I think the final thing is around smarter decision making. It's people are going to demand that the guesswork is taken out of strategies that the business is going to put in place or decisions that the business is making. And I think it's going to be really crucial for businesses in the SME sector to be able to collect information that helps them to make informed and insightful decisions. So there's basically four concepts that I want to quickly talk about. You're probably all aware of the concept of cloud computing. So what is cloud? Well, basically it's scalable and it's a subscription based, and it's usually accessed as an application or service that's accessed through your internet browser. The typical examples would be something like Gmail, Microsoft Office 365, Hotmail. I mean, everybody's been in cloud computing for years because we all have a website. So it's basically anything that's hosted externally to ourselves and we pay a subscription for each month. So there's other applications and services like Salesforce, and a lot of people are probably on Xero, the accounting package as well. So that's a big push. And again, what we're finding is that a lot of businesses are being shoved in this direction because it's gone from a work office environment to people working from home. And I guess one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing at the minute is we're getting bombarded with phone calls from customers who haven't taken that journey, have been resistant to that journey, and now panic has set in because it's a case of they have to go on that journey and they have to go on that journey quickly. Mobile computing is all about computing on the go. As you can see at the minute, I'm sitting on a beach somewhere. It's a lovely day. I can video conference from my deck chair. I've sun factor 50 on, going well. People want to be able to do things out of the office and on the go that they can do in the office and remotely, but without difficulty, without the challenges that a lot of businesses are facing now, moving from the office environment to the home environment. I mean, I've heard stories of friends have been contacting me, said they can't work from home because there isn't enough capacity to be able to work from home because of the way the business is set up, and it just makes their lives really, really difficult. So basically, that's a really big challenge, and it is absolutely affecting the productivity and the profitability of a lot of businesses. Unified communications is the third one, and unified communications really is around our ability to communicate with each other easily and using a single or a couple of platforms. I guess what we've got at the minute is, you know, you look at your mobile phones, you've got your email, you've got WhatsApp, you've got FaceTime, we're on Zoom this morning with Microsoft Teams. how are we going to simplify all of this and make it easy for our staff and our customers to be able to contact us? You know yourselves with email that our inboxes can get very, very full very, very quickly. And I guess the problem with email, particularly at the minute, is we get bombarded with so much white noise. So we're missing the critical things. So I guess what we've got to think about is going forward is the ability to communicate in a really simple and efficient manner. I think the last one that I want to talk about is the business intelligence. It's all about the ability to make smarter decisions. It's about being able to look at your customer database and easily pull out who the top 10 customers are, who the bottom 10 customers are, who's buying what, when they're buying what. And I think that's going to be really important really quickly for a lot of businesses. You know, a lot of our customers or depending on what business you're in, particularly in a supply chain that I'm in, there's a lot of uncertainty around the future of some of our customers. So to enable us to work, to keep working and to keep the cash flow going in the business, we need to be able to make better decisions. We need to be able to know or be able to see who's going to be buying what and what we need to invest our limited cash in. But I think, again, at the minute, there are several things that you really need to consider. And during this crisis, it's become more and more prevalent. I guess companies could be in panic mode. And the problem with that is that you put in a solution that really isn't suitable, or you pick a solution really quickly without actually understanding what your business processes are. The problem with that is that you have a perception. So if you're a particular person in a position in the business, that you will have a perception what other people do and how the workflows work. That perception may not be true. And I think that's really, really important to actually take some time to consider, speak to your stakeholders and see what your processes are before solutions are put in place, and before things can go really badly wrong. I think the second thing that you need to look at is actually understand your staff. That if you are considering on quickly moving to a new solution, that you've really got to consider the challenges that your staff currently face. We're all in this new world. A lot of staff have not worked from home before. They're finding it very, very challenging. They're finding it isolating, and they're really finding that, you know, that they have no support that's easily accessible. And I guess that's what we're finding. You know, people will sort of try and keep things to themselves. It could be a small issue that's really annoying them, but they don't want to feel stupid. They don't want to bother us because we're doing other important things. So I think it's really important to make sure that you do understand your staff, that you do understand that there are these challenges out there. And some people are more technologically savvy than other people. So the third thing that you need to look at really is, if you're starting to put these solutions in, that you don't end up with a lot of pieces of software that actually are no better for you and actually cause you more work. What you're really looking for is that your information flow is integrated, that your systems actually talk to each other. For example, we deal with a manufacturing business, and they have an accounting package, a customer relationship package, and an ERP package, which is all about supply chain and production line. And what's happening with that is that depending who the person is, who the person's involved in creating that new customer account, it could either be put into the ERP system or the CRM system. But those systems do not talk to each other. So really the challenge around that is there's no single point of truth. So what they've had to do is adopt a process of, when someone creates a customer record in one system, that customer record has to be created in the second system. So you can see the challenges that creates. You can see that information gets out of date really quickly. And if we're trying to get people to make better decisions, if that information's out of date really quickly, How does that business trust the information that's actually in the system? I think what amazes me when business implement IT systems is they'll actually take a solution before they actually look at what the requirements are. So a typical example is Salesforce. Salesforce is a customer relationship management system. It's really popular. You see it advertised all around the place, and customers will say to me, "Oh, I'm going to put Salesforce in. That looks like a good software package." And then when you start to dig through it, and you say, "Well, okay, so why are you going to put it in?" "Oh, because it looks good and I've seen the demo." What they haven't actually done is they haven't done any sort of planning or requirements analysis around it. The problem with that is that when they do, or if they do put that system in, 9 times, in fact, 9.5 times out of 10, it goes wrong and it's a complete waste of money. So I think it's really, really important, even in this time where time is precious and time is short and people want to do things really quickly, that you actually take a little bit of time to sit back and think about the consequences of putting a new IT system in. What I was going to cover off originally was the case study, but I thought more useful in a case study in the circumstances that we're in, that I'd leave some final thoughts. So I've sort of covered some of these off already, but the first thing is to plan. Any sort of new systems, new IT systems that you're going to put in, plan it. Make sure you plan it well. Make sure you think about all of the requirements and the dependencies. Speak to your stakeholders. Get a cross section of information from those people in the company that really count. At the minute, if you are struggling with getting people working from home and having the capacity to do that, what you need to do is actually prioritize your staff and identify your key people. I know some businesses are putting staff on rostering systems because they just don't have the capacity. So that's something else to think about. What you've got to do then is, once you identify those key people, is actually give them access to the critical applications and services. So don't be making any changes without considering the consequences and implications. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. A lot of people make changes and they don't know what the impact of that change will be. And obviously, in the environments that we're in, any change could cause massive issues for people, particularly when they're working from home. You've also got to be aware of application dependencies and compatibilities. I guess we're getting into sort of the technical aspect of it there, but a typical example would be, for example, a little add-in into Outlook that you click on that then files a document. Is particularly useful for lawyers and accountants. The issue with that, and the issue that we have come across for one of our customers, is that add-in actually only works for a certain version and it will not work for a new version. So this business has actually had to put everything on hold because that is a crucial application in their business. But a lot of businesses kind of do this without even realizing what the implications are. What you've got to think about, again, with the sort of working from home, is what about any manual processes that you have? What about any paper-based processes that you have? One of the things that we were able to do for a business was that they received invoices in by email. They printed those invoices, and the invoices were signed then through a number of people, stamped and dated. And what we've suggested to them is they actually save those invoices into DocuSign and set up a workflow so that the first person signs it, electronically approves it, and the next workflow is, once that's completed, it goes to the next person for signing. So again, it's all held electronically and there's no need for paper-based systems. I think one of the crucial things, particularly at the minute, is make sure your foundations are right. You don't really, if you are struggling, you basically aim for resilience and reliability. The performance can come later. I think that's really crucial. If you try too much to work on the performance, then potentially the reliability could fail. You've got to have a bit of patience. I know there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and people are there's a bit of panic. But even if you try and slow things down without putting things in place, because if you put things in place too quickly and they're not thought through, it could lead to bigger problems straight away or down the road. As I've mentioned before, you need to train and support staff, because some staff have never worked remotely or at home before, or never had a mobile device that they've used before. So it's really important to show that support and make sure that those staff know that however silly the question is, that there is going to be support for them. Make sure that we're all in this environment of working remotely. Make sure that your staff are doing things securely. So make sure that you've trained them in cybersecurity and you have those little bits of security in place, making sure their passwords are unique and complex, making sure they're not letting their kids use their home computer for stuff, just little things like that. And instead of thinking short term, try and think long term. I don't see this crisis, being over in 4 weeks. I think we're going to be, by the talk, 3, 6, maybe even longer. So I think if you have any short-term solutions in place, then you need to start thinking long-term about them. And the other thing that I think is a thing that people maybe need to start thinking about is, we've all been so busy working on our business that if things slack off slightly, does this give an opportunity to do the projects that we've been putting off? Not just technology projects, but things in our business that are going to help us when things get back to normal again, help us either become more profitable, help us get a footing in the market, or whatever that has to be. That's pretty much me. I think we're going to do some questions after, but I'll pass back to Mel.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I think very timely conversation given where we are at right now. We will be doing Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, pop them in the Q&A box and we'll be able to answer those. But I'd now like to hand over to Lisa to sort of wrap us up for the presentations this morning and talk about experience from the actual client side, but also the fact that Lisa is actually a psychologist and cultural transformation expert, and she's going to share her reflections on Mapion's culture and engagement journey over the past 2 years and the role that the workplace environment has actually played in this along the way. Lisa's experience in transforming cultures with clients across Australia and as a member of Mapion's leadership team ensures powerful and practical insights for anyone viewing culture as a critical part of their organisation's effectiveness. Lisa is passionate about developing solutions that enhance people and organisational effectiveness. As a psychologist, she specialises in developing leaders using psychometric assessment and creating positive cultural change in organisations. She's highly skilled at gaining buy-in to shared organisational values, challenging and transforming negative or counterproductive behaviours, and challenging thinking patterns and behaviours that are preventing high performance. All very relevant subjects in today's day and age, and I'd like to welcome Lisa now to hand over and take over.
Lovely, thank you very much, Mel. Now, Jeff said before that some people have different skill level when it comes to technology, so I'm going to ask you to bear with me whilst I learn how to do this. So hold on for 1 second. I wanted to do the beautiful transitions that everybody else did. It was so smooth. I was like, thanks for your understanding. Thanks, Mel. Okay, so the work environment, the impact on engagement. And I think that, can I just say, I'm just so impressed with the conversations of the previous speakers. I think that the quality that everybody brings, having a systems approach that Sonia's talked about is just so critical in the impact on people. And Melissa, the process that you actually undertake to get the work environment the best way it can be for people. And just even Jeff, and honestly, Jeff, you surprised me because I always think IT is people disconnect. It's like, but you're on it. Just like think of the people, which is kind of my mantra as well. So it's been lovely sitting here and actually be able to listen to everybody and the wisdom that's actually sitting here. I love the fact that Mel talked about the previous, it was level 14 of the same building that we're in. And when I first got to Livingston's at the time, Mapion now, is I was put into an office, in a really small office, a lovely view, really nice view. But it didn't actually suit my personality or preferred working style. So it was really interesting. I remember there's a couple of really key standout, well, it's actually 3 standout points for me. The first one was, I remember sitting in my office and I looked out the window and there's a crow, and the crow had another skeletal crow there that it was eating. So I was just like, it just depressed me. I was sitting with a beautiful view and it just kind of went, oh, I don't like this. And I wouldn't go away. It just would not go away. And it visited me every day. I'm really pleased it stayed. So it's still visiting at times, but another area. And so it just gave a feeling. And I know it's silly, but it just kind of did give a feeling to the environment. The other one was that we had a new grad start with us, and he was in a room opposite me, and he said the air conditioning wasn't working. The air conditioning wasn't working. So whenever I'd go in there to have a catch up with him, the heat. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. Come on, there's a spare office beside me on the other side, but you could just jump in there. And so he's like, oh, yeah, great. So we moved him in there, and then somebody came up to me and went, Lisa, you can't. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, that's only for the consultants and the directors on the outside. And I went, oh, well, that's not our values. So this it was a traditional law firm approach is my understanding, but it is absolutely not the values of the directors and the people in the organisation. There is no difference between people, but it was interesting. And so there were very obvious disconnects for me for what did the workplace represent for me and my values and the organisation one. So, Mel, the alignment between the values and what the company represents and stands for is so critical. And you don't really, quite often people don't actually consider that. It's just like, oh, it just is the way it is. So unpacking that's really important. And the final thing that it came to mind as well is when we had our merger, and we had Steve, who's our CEO now. He came in and he said he'd met with Alex and Nadia and a number of the directors and said, these guys are great. I love the way they think. And then he walked in to our office and he said to us, we were reflecting on it, he said, it didn't represent who you were. He didn't talk to me as to who you were. He said, so he had a moment where he had to reflect and say, oh, is this company the ones that we want to merge with? So I think that's incredibly powerful. And it's just around the physicality and the way the layout was. So Mel coming in and helping us move to a different level is fantastic. And I think that one of the key things for me is that social element. And we talked a bit, if you were here before the webinar kicked off, as we were talking about that social connection, and just I'm missing it. And it's only been a week. And the thing that I find really interesting is what I would do in the morning is I would walk straight, deliberately the long way round. So go say hi to reception, go into coffee, get my coffee, see who's there, and I would just walk around the whole area just to say hello to people. And that not being able to do that at the moment is like, oh, I don't like it. It's, where's my people? I can see people on screens, but it's not quite the same. But these are challenging times. And I think the challenge is that at the moment, is the uncertainty of not knowing how long this is going to go on for. So, I know naturally if I'm out on the road, I'm out working in client offices or in a cafe or wherever I am, I know I'll get back into the office and I'll be able to see everyone. And that's a really great moment. It's a really fun moment for us. And not having that certainty at the moment, I'm finding a little bit challenging. But we're doing everything we can to just keep that connection going. And I think that we're all going through it together. And I think it's about how do we shape the culture. And I think this is really critical. I think it is absolutely a moment in time that we're going to reflect back and go, this is where we then working remotely became the thing. And this is just the norm now. So we've been working remotely for quite a while, and we've been set up for a while. We've got the resources, we've got all the infrastructure, we've got our practices and routines. So that for us, this is not so much for transition. It is just the people component, seeing that face-to-face contact that's probably a bit challenging. So I guess when we look at culture, it's always, Mel, you defined it a bit earlier, which is just the way we do things around here. And it's made up of what we call the visible culture. So what are the things that we articulate and we say that represents us? So that's we have the values on the wall. We've got our organisational structure, we've got vision, we've got, you know, our purpose statements, etc., etc. But then what I'm really interested in, what I find fascinating in around culture, is what is it about the way things really get done? And that's the area I absolutely love, because we can say that we have integrity and transparency as values of an organisation. And then when it's like, but nobody's telling me anything in these uncertain times, so where's your transparency? So people are looking to the behaviours in the organisation now about how people are operating and making attributions. And we're in a high emotional state as collective. So we're heightened, and we're not using, as you know, Sonia said, our prefrontal cortex. We're back in our reptilian brain, which is keeping us in a safe space. So we're looking for fight, flight, you know, with freeze. And I like the 4 Fs and the flock. So what people can look together is we actually flock. We need each other at this time. And we're not being allowed to. So I think for our threat response, I think it's a really interesting space. And so the critical component is that we've got to be, it's not that we don't have hard conversations. We do in leadership. We have respectful, empathic conversations where we actually understand where a person's coming from, and we still hold people to account during this time. We've got to understand that this is unprecedented, and we can help people through it. So I think that I used this example in the last session. I thought I'd keep it in. I was going to take it out because, but I think it represents, I mean, there's some people who just would love to go to the hotel on, I think it's the left of my screen. I'm not sure if it's on yours. So the Henna Hotel, and they have robots at the front desk, and that's like, wow, that's fantastic. But I'm more attracted to the other hotel. So it's a little bit cheaper. It's a bit further away from the theme park because it's got that human element. But that's not to say that one size fits all. Some people will be absolutely attracted to the self-service and being served by a robot, and that's fabulous. So I think that when you come to your organisational culture, it's about how you feel when you go into a place. And it's where do you fit? Do you feel you belong? And it's all those things, and Mel articulated it really well, is that the design, it's not a one size fits all. Every organisation is different. Understanding people's journey. How is the space, the flow? How the furniture's been set up, are all those unconscious triggers for us that we're not even taking into consideration. But I know when I walk in somewhere, I go, oh, this is great. I can feel it. And I think people can feel it as well. So when we were going through the merger, so we did, obviously being psychologists, we like to measure things, behavioural scientists. So we measured our engagement score. So when we first came together, so the passion engagement score is organisational commitment, so how committed people are, job satisfaction, their intention to say. So you can see these numbers are absolutely fabulous, right? They're brilliant. So, and then we were like, okay, well, it's been a little while now, so let's just do a retest so we're making sure we're not sitting in a honeymoon phase. And we dropped a little bit, and that's okay, but I don't know that it's particularly significant, but those numbers are phenomenal. So if you're looking at research, this is well above benchmarks for our industry. So I'd love to do we're meant to do a pulse now, but it's been so crazy. We haven't had the opportunity to do it. I'd be interested to see how people are sitting. But I guess what I'm seeing on the front is like, it's that call to action at the moment for people. And when you've got an engaged workforce like we do at Mappian, people are going over and above. I'm seeing productivity, I'm seeing the commitment from people, and the conversations are around, you know, we're looking at, well, where can we reduce time if we don't need to, because some work has dropped off. If we need to pull back, who can do that? Who's got that capacity to make the sacrifice for the company? And I'm seeing people do that, and proactively, because at the end of the day, in 6-12 months, we want to be working for Mappian, because we are in the right place. And that's a collective, united approach the whole team's coming to. So it's everyone coming together during this time. So I'm seeing stress, I'm seeing the emotions, because it's an incredibly emotional time, the personal impact for people. is phenomenal. I'm listening to our IR team, and the conversations they're having are incredibly hard. People have to stand down 1,500 people overnight, you know, so the emotional toil for people is phenomenal. But we're all in this together, and we're all supporting each other, and the workplace and the way it's been designed, the culture, the IT, the technology, everything just comes in beautifully at the moment. It's not to say it's not hard. It's not to say we're not still challenging each other and going, oh, when you did that, I don't think that aligned with our values. So we're still having conversations, but the hard work has pretty much been done. So if we look at and living the values being absolutely core to you know, what we do. So I think flexibility is 100% that we live our value of flexibility. It's the design of the organisation, it's the technology, it's the leadership, it's the culture, all coming together to allow us to be flexible, and that, you know, that we still strive for excellence. These are really core values. These values are my values. And so research shows really clearly that when your personal values align with your organisational values, you know, you're in a really good place. That's where you need to be. So the people that work at Mappian, they're our values, and we do live them. If we don't always see it, we check in. So we're not avoiding having tough conversations. You know, oh, I don't, but we're coming from a place of understanding and trying to understand what's happening for people at the moment. So just to tailor it just a little bit more, I was thinking, well, what is it that makes the remote working work for us? And so one of the guys in the team, Jason, put together an article on this, and so I've just plagiarised to him to say, you know, when we're managing remotely, it's embrace flexibility with boundaries. It is not just let people go home and see you later, off you go, and, you know, it's about, well, what are the boundaries? You know, what are our, and it comes down to, do I have to work 9 to 5? No, we don't have to work 9 to 5 anymore. So what's the flexibilities? If I'm not online, I could go walk the dog, and then I can come back and I'll work a little bit later. So whatever that looks like. Negotiate it is important. Regular scheduled contact. So it's about, we don't just let culture go. If we don't proactively manage our culture, who knows where we'll end up. So proactively going, guys, we're in a new space now. Let's co-design our working life now together. So how often do we need to touch base? And if we find it's too much, just pull back and keep that analysis going, checking in with people about, is this working for us? Structuring clear guidelines and lifelines. So really funny, we actually, because as a group of us, we're quite interesting as a team, a lot of extroverts, a lot of introverts. So we've actually, because I do jump in a lot, and I do try, and so this is not the best medium for somebody who likes to jump in and add into conversations. So I found myself getting oh, sorry, and we were doing all this, oh, sorry, I'm interrupting. So, and then again, Jason came up with, you know, the language that you can start having just conversations. So I don't want to interrupt someone, but I need clarity. So we've got to see for clarity. You know, I need to do a process check-in. So my process check-in is, we've been going too long on this conversation. So can we just do a check-in? Or process check, I need to check in on the emotions of the team. So there's really good, and like, I think this was like, yay, I agree, you know. So lots of fun things as well that you can do. And I think that, you know, Sonia, you said it earlier, we're not having as much fun at the moment. You know, where's that, you know, those moments, and it's creating those and remembering, you know, it's tough, but we're in it together, and there are moments where we can keep having a little bit of fun, you know. And Jason has coined the phrase lifelines. So I think particularly when it comes to managing remote working, is that it's not the deadline. So that's when, that's it. We've got to check in before that. So those milestones, what are the deliverables along the way that show progress for people? So check in and have a lifeline, and not just let someone go and then it's too late. So that regular, creating a strong sense of value. So whilst we're not in the office, knowing that we're still contributing is absolutely critical. that what I am doing is adding value. So if I'm taking one day off a week to help the organisation, that's valuable. When cash flow is going to be challenged for lots of organisations, and we want to be here in the end. So knowing the value that people are contributing, or how people are contributing, is really critical. Now, Jeff, I don't know whether you know, but you were tapped in really nicely to that psychological safety, and that is absolutely critical for people to be able to go, you know what, I'm having a hard day, I'm not as productive as I am. And you know, as a leader, to go, okay, talk to me about what's going on, what can I do to help? So, but if people don't want to bother me because I'm too busy, or they think everything's, you know, bad, but it's a challenge for them, that's not good. We need those check-ins. We've got to find out what the reality is for people. But if I don't have psychological safety, they're not going to tell me. So I think it's critical that we absolutely work there and share the stories. You know, I'm just, you know, looking forward. Honestly, I said at the beginning, I'm looking forward to the faux pas. I really am. I know I don't know why. It's a dark humour I have. And just fostering that sense of connectivity for people. We just have to keep together in this, and we are in this together. We will get through it. It's not to say it's not tough times, and we're not diluting a message by any means, but let's shape our culture together. So I'm very, very pleased to be with Mappy, and looking forward to at the other end of this and being able to help people. So I will hand over to Mel, if I can work out how not to, oh, here we go, stop share, how's that?
There we go. Well done, Lisa. You nailed the technology, so fantastic. And look, thank you so much for sharing the insights that you have there from working at Mapian and the journey that you guys have actually gone on, because, you know, the workplace is one part of it, but we've always got to start with an organisation. They've got to have their own culture. But you guys have been on a fantastic cultural journey that's gone through this as well. And there was an extensive amount of change management. I mean, it's not like we just, you know, moved you from one space to the next overnight and went, da-da, here you go, hunky-dory, see you later. You actually went through a process of transitioning people from being in their one little box every day to being in a space where it was shared, and you had a completely different way of working, new technology. So there is definitely a transition that comes with that.
Absolutely. And some people were quite anxious about it because it's certainty. We like certainty. Our brain loves certainty. So, you know, but once they got there, it was just, and doing the walkthrough, so it was lots and lots of things that were done to actually support the transition. But a lot of people don't realise. So we did lots of things. So it was really well done.
Fantastic. Now, I've just had to shrink my screen down, so I'm not sure. Can you guys still see my screen there? The panel Q&A? Fantastic. We've got a couple of questions here, and one was from Simon with regards to the Ikigai concept and the concept of perfect harmony, and whether or not we were seeing a common cohesion between change management and those in business who are creating or influencing the culture. I think it's very dependent on each organisation as to whether or not we're seeing that shift. I'm definitely noticing organisations who are engaged in that culture, you know, organisations such as Mapian and those that we've worked with, that they are seeing that there is this whole purpose-led business structure that needs to sit underneath everything that we do, or actually over the top of everything that we do, and it needs to filter down. And we've seen so much evidence around the fact that when organisations are purpose-led, they are outperforming because people are far more engaged, they're far more aligned, and therefore that then drives business value, because it's not only your employees that are engaged and connected, it's also your clients, and they're the ones who are paying your bills. So once we've got that nice ecosystem and it's all centred around the purpose, then we're actually able to deliver far more value. The other question that we have here is for Lisa, and it's: when you're working remotely, how do you celebrate the wins of your organisation and your teams? Lisa, have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, what we had at Mapian is we actually have a bell that we actually ring so people would come and actually share any news like that. So we've got to look for ways around how we're doing that. We've got lots of different chats that we like Slack, that we actually celebrate and we communicate all the time. For this, so we would get together quite often. So we're in this virtual world. I think our plan is, well, there's going to be Friday virtual drinks this Friday. And it's just remembering to be really conscious of those wins and find a way, for whatever way it is for you, for your team, that will work. We do like, I'm going to be honest, we don't mind a vino on a Friday afternoon. So, you know, that's a great one for us to lift our glass and shout out. But we do lots of shouting out, and recognising each other is actually a really big part of our culture. And so we kind of naturally do it. So I'm not sure if that's answering the question enough, or if you would like a little bit more on that one.
Look, I think that's a great start to that, Lisa. And I think we're all kind of figuring it out as we go at the moment, because this is all very, very new for us. And I've seen friends having Friday night and Saturday night drinks over Zoom, and they've got dressed up. And this is, you know, just general girls having a catch up that can't go out on a Saturday night now. So it's a different world that we're living in, and we're having to find different ways and different needs. And I think, you know, daily huddles are a great way to keep connected with the team and make sure that we're all working on the same priorities, because it keeps us focused when we're not able to have that banter. And I think the thing that I have noticed the most in the most recent of this week is that informal banter that does happen just by being around other people at work. That's definitely something that's difficult to replicate, and it would be interesting to see how we find new ways and means to do that into the future. Well, if anyone else has any questions, pop them in the box. But otherwise, thank you very much for being with us. We've gone quite a bit over time, so I appreciate everyone hanging on the line and staying through. As you're aware, our event is normally a breakfast, and we provide you with some beautiful, yummy food, but then we donate the remaining proceeds to a charity. So all ticket prices have actually been fully donated to the Women's Legal Service at this time around. So they do a fantastic job of supporting women and children in domestic violence situations. And my view of this at the moment is this is far more prevalent than ever, because when we're all being confined back into our homes, these people are probably the most at risk in this situation. So I think it's really timely for us to ensure that while we've got all of this global crisis going on and a far more you know, a bigger conversation happening, that we don't forget some of the other more closest issues that are, you know, social issues that are a bit closer to home, and recent events that have occurred here in Brisbane as well. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that that's where the money was going. We're not putting it in our pocket. We wanted to be investing that back into our community and supporting other people. So look, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being with us today, and appreciate that it was a bit of a different conversation than it normally was. But if anyone's got any parting words, guys, feel free to take yourselves off mute and join the final conversation.
I just want to tell people to stay safe out there, follow the government advice, stay safe, and we'll all get out of this. We'll all get out of it. That's for me.
There's a lot of opportunity to learn from what we're experiencing now, and in finding new ways to connect with each other, and in leaders exploring their caring connection with their staff at a whole nother level. It's going to be really fascinating to see how we continue to bring that forward when we get back to work. Because I think there's a huge opportunity for us to take this forward into the office environment when we come back and not lose it. So I think my parting would be, let's all learn from this and really optimize how we're integrating and working together, because what exists on the other side is far more richer and arguably going to be more productive than what we left when we started all of this.
Very much agree.
I agree. And with kindness.
Yes.
Empathy and kindness, please.
Yeah.
We're all in it together. We're learning new ways.
That we are. So look, thank you very much to everyone for joining us, and thank you very much to our panelists for joining us this morning. And you all did wonderful on your technology, so I appreciate that. And I'll look forward to actually seeing you all in person very soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.